I talk about storytelling or mention storytelling, people are like, oh, come on. Oh, no, I have to just, go really deep down and see how I fared and how I got up and do some motivational stuff. And I'm not good at that. And I don't want to do that. And I always tell them that, this is not what you have to do. So it's not about a kind of motivational speaking or you have to share really intimate stories. So it's not about them. For me, storytelling is much more a tool.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at presentation agency 356 Labs. Yep, we are not only developing and training people from some of the coolest brands in the world how to prepare and deliver truly effective presentations, but we also organize and host the largest presentation skills conference in the world called Present to Succeed. I'm Boris, I'm your host for today's episode, and with me I have yet another episode. I have yet another incredible guest from the industry who is probably wondering why am I reading the intro right now. She is someone who works with a range of international clients, from expert roles and C-level executives to Harvard professors, and she's helping them write, design, and deliver those type of presentations that I just mentioned. Truly effective ones that bring results. She's also an author of the book called Generational Myths that was published in 2019. And lastly, she's also based in Budapest, Hungary, which is, oh, by the way, one of my favorite cities in Europe and thus in the world. So who is she? Her name is, I think, Orsolya, right?
Orsolya. Yeah.
That's a very hard to pronounce name, though.
I know. It's like when our kids were born, we were like, okay, we have to pick international names because I have so much trouble with mine.
All right. And the family name is Nemes, right?
Nemes. Yeah. It actually means
Nemes.
noble. It means noble. Yeah.
Really?
In Hungarian. Yeah.
That's nice.
It
And
is.
today we're going to be talking about storytelling, everybody, or a lot of things related to how you build a truly effective story. So let's start this up. Are you ready?
Yeah, totally. Hit me.
So let's start. Let's start with the backstory. Everyone in our industry has a very interesting backstory. No one gets out of school or out of university thinking that they'll work in the presentation space. They end up working in the presentation space somehow. What happened on your end?
Just imagine a presentation training that is super boring, and you're the trainer. So that was me 10 years ago. I was working at a company that was working in organization development, soft skills trainings and stuff like that. And they gave me their usual training I had to perform to our clients, and I was really bored. And I was like, okay, this cannot be like that. I mean, this has to be much more exciting. And I started reading up on it, and that's how I found authors and communication gurus like Nancy Duarte, Gary Reynolds, and
Yeah.
Chip and Dan Heath. And I was like, there's this whole new world. I mean, the presentation revolution was just about to start. It was actually, it wasn't about to start. It was in full boom. And I was like,
All
okay,
right.
this is really, really cool. I mean, you can do so many things with presentations. And what really fascinated me that, if you do it in a smart way and you put beautiful slides next to it, you can do amazing things. So for me, presentations are kind of applied art. And I really like learning by doing. And I started to design presentations based on what I read. I read a lot of blogs and watched a lot of videos. And mostly I self-taught myself what I know about
Yeah.
presentations. And actually, what happened is that back then, SlideShare was a pretty big place to go for information on presentations as well. And I started publishing presentations on SlideShare. And it was really exciting because they started putting or feature my presentation on the front page. You go to SlideShare, there's my presentation. I was like, come on, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But the final push came when slideshare reached 10 million uploads, and the editorial team basically they picked their favorites, and one of my presentations got into the top 20 of their picks, and I was like, okay, being in the top 20 presentations out of 10 million, that's this is actually a pretty straightforward sign that I have to do something with that. And I ended up with this story on a TEDx Youth um, stage. So I
Yeah.
shared my story, how I got there. And it was really interesting because the country manager of HBO saw that presentation, and he just called me, please come and train my people, my salespeople
Yeah.
to present better. So I ended up in training them. And I was like, I told him that, this is a very new way. This is new to me. This is the first time I'm doing it. And he was like, okay, I'm fine with that. I like what you're doing. You seem like to be really good at this. So just let's do this. And ever since then, I've been working with people from all around the world and doing this. And this is an amazing journey.
Nice. Very, very nice. And unexpected as with everybody. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
completely unexpected. You are super passionate about the world of storytelling. Obviously, storytelling is a little bit of a buzzword nowadays. Everyone in every industry, on every level is using the word storytelling. Why, in your opinion, is storytelling so important?
Yeah, it's exactly what I think, that it's a buzzword now, and I think storytelling is a bit overused, and I don't like to think it about that way. What I see is a lot of times when I talk about storytelling or mention storytelling, people are like, "Oh, come on! Oh no, I have to just go really deep down and see how I fared and how I got up and do some motivational stuff, and I'm not good at that, and I don't want to do that." And I always tell them that this is not what you have to do. So it's not about a kind of motivational speaking, or you have to share really intimate stories. So it's not about them. For me, storytelling is much more a tool, or it's a kind of process. How you think about what you have to say. And I think storytelling is full of tools, and it's a very nice toolbox, and it helps you with structuring your thoughts. It helps you with coloring your ideas, and that's what I like to do. So I read a lot. I've always been reading a lot, and I think storytelling helps you to find really good analogies, metaphors. You can express yourself much better. Or if you build up your whole structure, it is basically a form of story. I mean, I'm not the first person telling you this on this podcast, and I think it's a very important and very useful tool, and very, very easy to use if you think about storytelling in the terms of being a tool and not something you deliver.
No, all right. So yeah, obviously buzzwords become popular and
Yeah,
become buzzwords, by the way, because of that. But still, there is quite a lot behind it, and as you said, this is just one of the tools that presenters, let's say, can utilize because it is definitely powerful. In storytelling, I would say, and when we talk about presentations and when we talk about each and every story, everyone, or at least many people, I think, in our space, hopefully so, and many people who are listening know that the audience is just like you understanding who the audience is. In our case, we're being listened by some of the people in our industry, meaning presentation experts and presentation people or presentation designers. We're also being listened by designers, but our main audience are business people, the ones that actually came at Present to Succeed, right? This is, if you see the data, by the way, it's amazing. You have everybody, the HRs, the marketing people, the sales people, the IT people, everybody. As we like to say, the people who are being asked to present, whether they like it or not, right?
yeah,
So when all of those people have at least once probably heard that the audience is the critical factor, and one of the most interesting types of feedbacks that we got from, I don't know the name exactly, from the conference, was, it's great that you're telling me that the audience is important and I need to know them, but tell me, how can I know them? Tell me the practical things, tell me the practical steps that I can use to know them? So what are your thoughts, because you're spending a lot of time analyzing the audiences for your customers or probably for your talks too?
Yeah.
How should somebody analyze the audience that's going to be in front of them?
All right. Actually, I would like to take a step back first because for me, audience analysis is just, it's not the first step. For me, context analysis is the first step. You know, what's happening. So what I like to do is find my wiggle room first. I call it the wiggle room. And it's, a kind of where three things overlay. One is, where are you presenting? So it's really important whether it's a conference room or whether you are talking in front of 500 people. Is it a conference? Are you just one speaker, or are you one out of a series of speakers? So I like to get a little bit context on that. You know, are you on stage, or are you just in front of a TV or something like that, where you can project your presentation? The second thing I like to do is audience analysis, what you just said. And for me, it's always three questions. One is demographics, age, gender, background, ethnicity,
Brilliant.
even that could be also interesting, and also education, for example. So these are just a few factors. Then the second bunch I like to take a look at is psychological kind of motivations. What are they like? What are their fears? What are their days like, for example, or what's important to them? What makes them tick? What is their goal? What kind of solutions I can give to them, and stuff like that. And the third thing I like to do is a kind of contextual scenario. Are they there like voluntarily, or is it mandatory that they attend? um, what is their motivation behind that? Why are they there? What they want to do? Did other people put them because of something? So for example, if
Yeah,
people for it's just take a training, for example. Some people volunteer and they are eager to learn, and other people are just, they told me that I don't present very well, and I come here and, let's see what's going up there.
what
So
happens?
different motivations level are always get different results. And the third thing I like to do is, where my presentation is on this spectrum. And on the spectrum, I like to see two. So the two questions are, whether it's a smaller or larger audience, because you will definitely be doing different talks to when you're presenting in front of 5 people, or when you're presenting in front of 500 people. You have different toolboxes, basically, because
Yeah,
the smaller the group is, I like to make it more conversational.
yeah,
And the bigger the bigger the room is, the less options I have to involve them. Like, I cannot ask 500 people what you think, only in rhetorical questions or something like that. And the other factor I take into consideration is whether it's a formal or an informal setting. So when but I think business world now is becoming more and more informal. So it's not like, it's very, very formal and you have to use formal language. And that's really boring and soulless, I think. So I always try to go as informal as I can be within the context. So these three things, where I am presenting, who am I talking to, and how what my options are. That's always really important for me.
got it. And what about like when you talked about the demographics and the psychographics? Let's call it this way.
Yeah.
Um, how do you approach, like what would you do or what would you recommend someone doing in order for them to find that information? Like what are the steps? Like where do they find that type of information? Because at the end of the day, okay, now we know what we are searching for, you know, so now where do I find it?
Do you mean the bullet points I need to find the answers for?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
where do I know the demographics of the audience? Where is it written? Like where can I find something about that, let's say?
About the specifics.
Yeah, about the
Yeah.
specifics of the audience.
I think you can always ask. So for in a lot of cases, for example, when they ask me to do a presentation, I always send back like a list of questions. These are the questions I would be really happy to get answers to. And most of the time, the organizers are really eager to share those informations. And you
Yeah.
can always ask back or ask some people who know these people. Or if you have like a small group, you can even know from the calendar invite, maybe even, who is attending, and you can check them out if it's important to know that. And as for the questions, which questions to ask, there is a blog called 6 Minutes, and there is a really nice guideline there you can download for free, basically, that helps you with audience analysis. So just go to six minutes and search audience analysis, and you will find some
I'll
really
make
good.
sure
It's a
we.
cheat sheet, basically. So it's
So you said 6 minutes.
yeah,
All
6 minutes
right.
by Andrew Dlugan. Yeah,
Audience analysis. We'll
analysis.
find that and we'll link it up for everyone.
Yeah,
It will be in the show notes and in the
thanks for
blog
that.
post accompanying this no, podcast episode. So yeah, I think that what you're saying is like super super practical now. That hey, just ask. Sometimes you can ask the people around you. We, for example, in our trainings call this the network around you. Be
Hmm.
that your friends, your colleagues, your family, whoever it's
Yeah,
around you. Sometimes you can ask the organizers. Sometimes you are the organizer of the event, right? And you will know who is coming. As you said, you have a calendar invite, maybe just see the results, right? Who accepted, who,
exactly.
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
uh
and so
yeah,
just one more thing, that, for example, when I'm doing training, I'm even asking the people who will attend the training. So I always send out the questionnaire. Of course, it's nice that I have something in mind, but I'm always tailoring what I say and how I say it based on what they tell me. What, these are the topics I'm thinking about. Tell me, which are you most interested in? Where do you need some help? What are you doing while in presentations? Where do you need something extra or support? So that always helps me as well, and they always find it much more useful. So it's much
of
easier
course.
to hit home when you know who you are talking to.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, every single time when we also approach a training, it's like this we call it a pre-training meeting where we just ask questions, about
Yeah,
the training, about the group, about the content itself, so that we make it as tailored as possible to that group, which, as you
exactly.
mentioned, just makes it so much more desirable by them because they know that they are going to listen and cover things that they want that are just important to them.
Yeah, and
It's
I think audiences always ask two questions. One is, who are you? What authorizes you to talk to me about this topic? So it's credibility, basically. And the second question is, what's in it for me? Why
of
why
course,
why is it worth it to me? And if you get the answers to these questions, or I mean, credibility, you have to build it up. But about the second part, what's in it for me, that's basically what you need to find, and when you find it, you can center your whole story around it.
yeah. Absolutely. I would just add probably here for the sake of completeness that once you have a calendar invite or once you know from the organizers or once your friends tell you whatever they tell you, right? By the way, interesting fact about the people around you, right? If you think about it, when you're asking your network for some ideas in regards to who is going to be in front of you, sometimes you everyone who's listening, sometimes you guys will notice that what ends up happening is those people are actually sharing with you things that you are not able to find anywhere else,
Exactly.
which is crazy cool, right? I would say that the other channel that we are not mentioning, which I think we are not mentioning because everyone considers it by default, is that hey, wait a minute, if I have your name I can Google you, right?
Exactly. That's why what I meant by checking the calendar invite. You can then Google them.
Absolutely. So let's go back to audience. Now we know how to approach, like what are we searching for and where do we find it. Now let's talk about one of the topics and one of the moments which HRs are really passionate about, especially when they talk about their people. Like it is very hard, they say, for their people to find the right message, to communicate the message. They're just presenting some information and it seems like, it looks like, it sounds like there is no cohesive thing.
Hmm.
Like there is no the message is not clear at the end. Like everyone is okay, what's going on? Like what is expected? Why am I here in first place? Like what
Yeah.
happened here in the last 30 minutes? So what's the process that you follow? What do you advise your customers to do, or your trainees, attend students, or whatever we may want to call them? Like how do you approach this?
How to find your message. Yeah, I think the first thing to do after you know who you are talking to is to decide on the style of your presentation, because different styles, I think, require different messages. So, for example, you need to decide whether you want to inform people. So, is it like an informational type of presentation, like I'm presenting my project results, for example, and I'm telling people about that. That's a kind of informative presentation. Another type is educational. You know, what we are doing here is kind of educational. You know, we want to share tips and tricks, and we want people to become better communicators. So that's what we do right now. This is an educational type of conversation. And the third type is a kind of narrative presentation. That's where TEDx comes in, for instance, or that's where motivational speaking comes in. That's also a different type of presentation. Then change is imminently in the
Yeah,
talk. And once you have that, you need to find your goal. You know what I want to achieve by the end of this talk. That will also help you find your message. You know, I want to. Yeah, I want to inform them. I want to motivate them. I want to educate them. I want to help them with something. I want them to see something more clearly. I want them to buy into my idea. So these goals are always very important to find, because that will help you with crafting your message afterwards. I think then what you need to find is a kind of like central theme. I know it's kind of a cliche by now, hopefully, but I always like to ask my clients, you know, if people remember only one sentence out of your talk, or if they cancel your talk and they're like there's a room full of people there, and you have like one sentence to tell them, what would you tell? What is your topic about, or what is your presentation about? And the third thing, I think, what helps with finding your message is outlining this change. You know, what is that they already know where they are right now, and where you want to get them to. So, like this move from and move to. So, where I want them to be by the end of my talk. And I think
yeah,
these three questions will definitely help you find what you actually want to say. And I always also recommend my trainees or the people I work with is that, you know, make it imperative. So it shouldn't be like a sentence that like, you know, this is the result. This is what I wanted to tell you. That's not the message. So you always have to make it imperative. You know, the very blunt structure is, and you can then, you know, say it nicely as well, is I want you to do this, so this is what I want you to do. That's how a proper presentation should and I think actually there was a really interesting research where they were looking at, you know, the content of the presentation, and they found that people who have a strong opening and a strong ending get better rates than those who have a strong middle. So that's why I think it's really important to first, you know, start strong and then end strong and end with this call to action.
yeah. Primacy and recency effect kicks
Yeah,
in here, I think. All right.
definitely.
So what about the next step would be, once you know who those people are, once you know what you want to achieve, obviously, from this presentation, and you have a complete, like, 100% clarity in regards to that, you should be brainstorming your talk and potentially afterwards structuring the talk. How are you approaching it? What should people do here? Like, what are the practical type of tips and tricks? What have you found that works very well for your customers? Tell us more.
Well, I like to do a 10-step process before I even open PowerPoint. So I think
Yeah,
one of the main idea is to take the whole thing offline. So just, you know, really get a huge piece of paper. It can be this, you know, A4 type piece of paper, but I actually like to go bigger, because the bigger my paper is, the more freely I can work.
okay.
And Yeah, actually, this really helps me because I'm always just scribbling, I'm drawing arrows and stuff like that. So for me, that's a good process, and I always use several papers, so not just one. So the first step for me is brainstorming, and for me, there are the part is getting ideas on page without filtering them. So this is all about not definitely only content, but also about you have to put as many ideas there as you can. So that's a collecting, just collecting ideas. And then I like to the second step is filtering, seeing what's useful from this pool and what's not useful. And after getting those, I always just circle them, these ideas are useful. And then I like to group them because most of the time people just don't think in structures. We usually usually just go like we oh, this is the coffee machine. From the coffee machine I jump to coffee. From coffee I jump to I have to go to the store because it's running out. So we jump from topic to topic, from idea to idea. And once we have filters of thoughts, we need to group them into like nice groups. And what I like to do then is after grouping those, I like to label them, or I like to label, these are my main thoughts. These are what I definitely want to include. And you always have to keep your message in mind. Filtering is always when I'm filtering, I'm always reflect back on what my message is and whether it's supporting my message or not. So that's I think the crucial part. And then I really like to do this little structure. And for me, it's a really simple structure. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I organize these filtered messages into the structure. And it's always like I think the idea of the beginning should be, it has to introduce your topic. It has to show what you are talking about, and it always have to answer the "what's in it for me" question. So by the end of the introduction, people need to know what I'm talking about. And then the middle, I always structure the middle in three parts. 3 points, three distinct points that don't overlap. It can be anything. It can be, this is a project, this is what we did, these are the results. Or this can be the past, present, future. Or it can be, this is the problem, these are the possible solutions, this is the best solution in my opinion. So it can be basically anything, but this number three is a magical number, and it works
Yep.
in structure as well. And in the end, I like to close with summarizing what I just taught, because as you just said, this recency effect is taking hold, and people don't necessarily remember what I've been talking about during the whole presentation, just the end. And after that, I like to close with a call to action. This is what I want you to do, or this is what I want you to take away from this whole thing. And my trick is not to go from the start to the end, but I work like bottom up. So I always start with the end, and then I define how I get to the end, what my three main points are that get me to the end. And in the end, I think about, how I want to start this whole presentation, because I have found that it's much easier to find an introduction when I know the journey where I want to take them, than the other way around. So it's always interesting. And then I do the supporting points. These were the main points. These how I want to support these main points. And then I like to add a pop of color. Stories, data, whatever. Just to fill in the blanks. And then I always put it aside and hopefully give it a day or two, because my head is racing. And then with the next day, I come back with a fresh pair of eyes. And that's the murder your darling part. So that's when I kill off everything that's not useful, because there is always some extra stuff that's actually not necessary. So everything that's not useful for my audience, or no matter how dear it is to my heart, or no matter how dear it is to me, I always try to weed those out, because those won't help. And then when I do that, I have found that people usually have a lot of problem with making transitions. You know, from getting from
Mm,
the introduction to the, they know the structure, but they don't necessarily know, you know, how to connect those points. So I always takes extra care, you know, to make sure that I have my transitions from intro to point one, from point one to point two, from point two to three, and then to the end. So that's, I
yeah.
think, a crucial point. And in the end, I always like to draw a little storyboard, because I usually don't have like 5 slides. You know, each idea once, so one idea per one part of the speech, but more. And I always like to do a little storyboard, and then when I have that, I do the presentation. So it's maybe it looks a long process, but it's actually a really, really quick process because it just structures your time differently. So you do more on paper and less in PowerPoint. And it's actually, for me at least, and my trainees also say that after realizing, or after learning about this structure or this process, they can actually go much, much more faster than they did before, because it's not, you know, hours and hours and hours in PowerPoint, but a lot of work offline, and then you go digital basically.
Yeah, let's go back a little bit when you said that you were brainstorming
Yeah.
the presentation itself and you were deciding on more or less you're filtering out some of the content on a very early stage. Like, what are the criteria in order for you to say, hey, this content is useful and cool, and this one is not? Like, what are you using for a criteria to define, okay, that's in and that's out? Like, how do you filter it?
Yeah, I think there are two criterias you need to take
Mm,
into consideration. First is the audience. Actually, three. One is the audience. Is it relevant to them, or does
mm-hmm,
it help them get there where I want them to be? The
mm-hmm,
second part is my message. Is it
yeah.
supporting my message? And the third part is, you know, does it fit in the whole flow? Because sometimes you can go into sideways, side tracks, side paths, and you can go really, really into different areas, which are nice and might be interesting. But once you have this, and then you can find your way back really, really easily. So I think that in a way, what you need to do is go take a bird's eye view. You know, when you fly up. I mean, I've never flown like a bird before, but this is how I imagine it. You know, as if I were a bird and I were to fly over this whole thing, I would see only the what's important, and not every single tree. I would see the forest and not every single tree, and that's what we need to show people. I think the forest and not the trees.
Mm. Yeah, and by the way, what you said also with the fact that you start always at the end, meaning, hey, here is where I want to leave the audience,
Yeah.
and now let's see how I will leave them there. Like, what do I need to do or say or tell or show or whatever, to leave them there. I think that is one of the very, like, one of those approaches which truly truly work, defining that end state, that point B, in the trip, if you wish,
Yeah.
is always so, by the way, it's such a mandatory thing. Like, it's such an important thing. Otherwise it doesn't really matter what you're going to be talking about and what are you going to be including, because nothing will actually be leading them to the place that you want. If you don't define it, it doesn't really matter what you're saying, because you don't know where you're going in first place. So it's
Exactly.
very, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, and it's so funny because there, in a lot of cases, you know, at the end of a presentation, that's what I hear. You know, I mean, they thought about how they started, they thought about their journey, but in the end, they didn't think about their message. And if they don't have that message, if they don't have where they want the audience to be in the end, then there is no point basically, because I won't remember a bunch of information. That's like, you know, the most important sentence, the last sentence, I think, because most of the time that will put everything I've said
Yep.
already in place.
Yeah, and about the end, well, once you brainstorm the presentation and you go and sleep over it, and just go back to it and just look at it with fresh eyes, I think that there is so much truth in that, and I hope that people will hear that and that will also tell them, hey, I shouldn't be doing my presentation in the same day when I'm delivering them. Because
Definitely.
if I, yeah, I mean, especially if it's an important talk, right? Yeah. What,
Yeah,
by the way, what do you recommend people to do? Like, how much time do you advise them to spend on an important presentation?
a super important presentation.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe it's easy to say the more they have, the more they can spend, but like if
yeah,
you
I know,
have to
but people are
throw in a
busy.
magical
So
number,
yeah, but what I can tell you is that when I'm working with TEDx speakers or TED speakers, they are putting
Yeah,
into 80 to 120 hours into their 15 or 18 minutes. So that's a
yeah,
reference
which
point. But everybody is different. So for example, me, I like to work with a lot of slides because I make very visual slides. But for example, my husband, he hates those slides. I mean, if I were to put him in front of my slides with the same topic and we have the same preparation and do everything, and he has to present with my slides, he would be all over the place because
yeah,
he has a much like, I wouldn't say a clearer structure, but he has these chunks of ideas in his head he wants to
of course,
cover, and what he needs is like, 5 slides, and he's cool for an hour because
yeah,
and his talk is structured and everything because he did the preparation part, but actually for him my slides are holding him back. And of course, I
yeah,
don't know, designing 100 or I don't know 80 slides takes much more time than designing 5 slides. So that's, for example, a big difference in the preparation part. But
yeah,
I cannot say how much. What I like to think in is, time, how much time you have. If you have 15 minutes, you will do a completely different presentations than if you have 50 minutes, for example.
yeah,
So I really hate when people say that, you have to have 5 slides. Why on earth should I have 5 slides? Give me
yeah.
5 minutes and then I will decide on the number of slides.
Yeah, I think that if even I think that the case with the slides and someone using someone else's slides is a very problematic
It
moment.
is.
That's never going, like, I have never ever, by the way, seen this work,
No,
because it's just two different people approaching the same topic, yet they have a very different view on how that topic or how that message needs to be conveyed. And when
exactly.
you just ask somebody, hey, use my way of thinking, the other side says, I have a different point, like I have a different way of approaching this, and it's
Exactly.
like you're pushing them to do something that they don't want, and
Yeah,
it's
and there, that's where authenticity and credibility flies right out of the window, because it's obvious that these are somebody else's thoughts, and you are not comfortable in the situation.
that is, by the way, for everyone that's listening, if someone in your teams push you to use someone else's slides, please listen to us. And if that happens for you for first time, please promise us that the first thing that you will do is to tell them, no, that's not a good idea. Even if I don't have the time, I'll spend the time to do my own slides. It will
Mhm.
take you more than that for you to adapt to someone else's way of thinking. Like
Yeah,
it
but
will take
actually,
way
what's also important, I think, is that in a lot of there are a lot of people out there who are presenting with somebody else's slides. But what I mean by that is that somebody else designed those slides for them, and that's
yeah,
completely okay.
that's completely different.
And that's completely different because what you need to be comfortable with is the structure, and you have to be
Yeah,
comfortable with, you have to be familiar with the slides as well. So for example, for corporate people, for assistants, for example, and managers who work together, for example, the assistant is doing the slides for them, or a presentation
yeah,
agency is doing your slides for them. I always advise them to, once you have this structure, and then do the storyboard. So first talk about the structure. This is the first part. This is the introduction. This is what I thought you should be doing there. This is the first, second, third point. This is how you should close. And then you can always adapt and change and do things differently. So that's okay. And once you do that, do the storyboard, and then go over it and see, is the chart in the storyboard I want to show, is the story in the storyboard I want to tell. So you need to be familiar with that, and then somebody else can actually do your slides, because that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is story, and how the story translates to slides.
Yeah. And the story comes first, obviously, which is
Yeah.
very, very important. It doesn't start with PowerPoint or Apple Keynote or Google Slides
No,
or
or save as.
yeah, I mean that is not how it works. Brilliant. We need to stop here somewhere. Like that topic of building up the story of a talk could be obviously a thing that we can discuss for many, 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 many hours. But before we allow you to go, we always ask our audience a few more questions, which are related to, first of all, who else, like who is that one person, I would say, that you think we should invite to our podcast and get for our listeners and the people that are in our community, because he or she made a great impression on you, somehow related to presentations. Do you
Yeah,
have a
actually,
name?
it's a hard question because there were so many brilliant people on the podcast before. So I'm
That
I
is
have
true, by the way. I would
yeah,
agree with that.
actually, yeah, because a lot of people who wrote wonderful books that had a great influence on my work were already there. So
Yeah,
I'm really honored to be here after them. But if I have to say something who has definitely not been on the podcast before, I would recommend Alex Reister. We are slideshare buddies from 10 years ago, basically. So that's how I got to know her, and I got to know her based on her blog, Creating Communication. She the way she thinks and the way she translates ideas into presentations had a really huge impact on what I think and how I think. And she's a professor. Actually, now she's working at the Embry-Riddle University, teaching aeronautical students to share their messages better. She has courses on at this university, and I think she's a brilliant teacher and a wonderful communicator. So I think she would fit this
interesting.
podcast amazingly.
Brilliant. All right, you need to introduce me to her, and from there we'll
Yeah,
make it
I'd
happen.
be happy to connect you too.
Brilliant. One last question. That's a two-part question, however. So
Okay.
stay with me here. What is the best place for people to connect, meaning in social media? And then second part of the question, what is the best place for them to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay, LinkedIn is always cool, so that's an easy way to reach me.
All right.
And actually, I have just started an Instagram account. I don't have much
All
followers yet because I have an Hungarian account and I have an English one. It's called Power Up Your Point, and some
right.
really cool material is coming up. There are some posts there, but now that life is getting back to normal and kids are getting back to institutions, I have much more time to do that. So Power Up Your Point is an Instagram account, and I'm sharing presentation tips and tricks there. So it would be nice to connect there as well. And if there are any topic you would like me to tackle, just in a post, obviously, or story or something like that, and then
Brilliant.
yeah,
Okay,
just
we'll link.
write me.
Yeah, we will link up the Instagram account and the LinkedIn account.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Sounds to power up your point. That's
Yeah.
an interesting. That's an interesting use. That's a user profile, right? On Instagram,
Yeah.
that will be the yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
because PowerPoint and Power Up, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah. Makes sense. By the way, the fact that this one is available is also true. Is also cool. I mean, not very often you will find something that's a little bit closer to what you're talking about that's available still.
Yeah.
So you got lucky there. I mean, that is nice,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. I was also amazed. Yeah, I searched for this, and oh, neither YouTube nor
Oh,
Instagram is taken. What happens? What happened here?
yeah. Good for you, like good for you, good that you found it and you booked it for your work and what you're going to be sharing there. I will make sure that it is both on the show notes and in the blog post for sure, the same way as it should be. As I'm looking at my notes with the where did that go? The 6 minutes block and the audience analysis
Yeah.
cheat sheet, so we're going to link that one too. This was wonderful. This was great. And it's already 45 minutes.
Oh
It's
my
insane.
God.
Just think about that. Just think about it. Thank you so much for joining. That was great indeed.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun and an honor.
Yeah, everybody, you heard a lot of practical tips and tricks here. Now, if you're complaining that you don't know how to analyze your audience, it's not fair anymore, okay? It is not fair anymore. Like, we just dropped you the things and everything that you need to do to find the information, structure your talk, etc. Now it's on you, and now you just need to put in the time and the effort. That's it. Everyone does it from our world. We do it for our customers. Now it's your time. All right. So again, huge thanks to you for joining us, and for everyone else. Take a look at all of the links that we're going to put in the show notes, and of course 356lab.com is our website, and present2succeed.com, the website of the conference. We hope to see you there in 2022. The event will be again in April, so stay tuned. The tickets are already on sale. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you really enjoyed that one in the same way as we did. I hope. I think we enjoyed that one definitely. Even though I was late, if I have to be honest, even though I was late. So if you liked it, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. We'll appreciate it. And what else? Nothing, I think. So see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.